We've had a problem with the television broadcast over in Africa. We got to get that. What do we got to? All this, it's all going on. And I said, do you think I would have sat there and just rambled on with Dr. Summerall? I had a list of questions. I'm like, number one, number two, number three, if we get to it, right? And that's what I went after. When I met Dr. Summerall, man, because I don't know if you heard, whenever I met him down in Houston. But whenever I went to his church, he told me, he said, how soon can you come to South Bend? So I said, okay, I'll get there as soon as I can. When I got there, he said, well, when you get there, come see me. So I walked in the front door. I said, I'm here to see Dr. Summerall. Do you have an appointment? Nope. He just told me when I got here to see him. Okay. She said, go down the hall, door on the right, knock on the door. Okay, I went, knocked, come in. Now, I walked in, and his office was kind of long, and I walked in and looked over, and there he was sitting at the desk writing. Before I had left, because my wife and my kids were still here in Texas. And so I told my wife, she said, well, what are you going there for? I said, I don't know. I said, but I know this. I've got to know two things. I've got to know how to know when I'm being led by the Spirit, right? And I have to know how to know the will of God. And she said, well, you think, you're going to find it when you go there? I said, hope so. That's the two things. If I can be sure to know when I'm being led by the Spirit, and if I can know beyond a shadow of a doubt what the will of God is, everything else will fall in place. And so I went up there, and he said, come in, and I walk over there, and I'm standing there, and I recognize, that he's busy, so I'm not going to start talking until he is done. And he's just sitting there writing, and he just stops. To know the will of God, read the Bible. To be led by the Spirit, do the Bible. Went back to writing, and I'm standing there like this, because I'm like, do I go home now, or what do I do? There it was. And we did talk a little bit longer. Then he quit writing, and we talked a little bit. But he never. He knew I was. I actually didn't know I was from Texas. We just met here. He never asked me that, and he never asked me any details about my life. Why? Because I wasn't there. He wasn't there to know about my life. I was there to find out how to live the way God wanted me to live. And so he didn't. He never asked me. He never asked me if I had a wife and kids, or he never asked me that stuff. Now he found out later because we served on his prayer line, and he met my wife, met my kids, and all that. During that time. And matter of fact, his son Stephen baptized my son, and so we had all this stuff, and we were around him, regularly, pretty much every morning. And so we had all that, but he never. Why? Because that stuff doesn't matter. Think about it. What does it matter? What matters is, what are we doing for the kingdom today? Not where have you been? Why? Because if you tell me that, all you're trying to do is get me to understand you. And I'm not going to ever understand you according to the flesh. I can only understand you according to the Spirit. And I'll treat you according to the Spirit, because according to the Spirit, this is who you are. So this is how I expect you to act. This is how I expect you to talk. And this is how I'm going to talk to you. So it's not about where we came from. Everybody's got a story. So, but honestly, what counts is not your history, but your future. Today, what are you going to do? Amen? That's what it comes down to. So in these, now, here, I'm going to have to, we still got time. We're good. So notice he says here in verse, where are we at? Verse 11? Yeah, 11, yeah. There, yeah, because I want to get to that. Okay, we'll back up to verse 10, just because we're talking about this new covenant. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws into their mind and write them in their heart, and I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people. Now notice, if he hasn't written his laws in your mind and in your heart, then technically he's not a God to you, and you're not his people. Because that's the covenant that he said, I will do this. So if you've come to him and connected yourself to him, then this has happened. So you know what to do. And it's in your heart to do it. Why? Because of Philippians 2:13. It is God who is in you both to will and to do his good pleasure. God's already put that in you. So when people are like, I just don't know what to do. Yeah, you do. You just don't want to do it. And you're trying to figure out an easier way to do it. You're trying to find out a way to do it that it's not painful. And sometimes there are ways to do it, but most often there's not a way to do it without there being some pain involved in it, meaning you making the decision, right? If you want to get your mind renewed and you're focused on that, then the painful decision of what friends you're going to have to cut out of your life is going to be there. But most people won't do it. Why? Well, I don't want to be mean. Well, then keep being stupid. Because that's what it comes down to, because you have to have your mind renewed. And anybody that's going to hinder you from doing that, you need to remove that out of your life. Because what's most important? See, when Dr. Summerall, he didn't say, listen, meet me this evening in the lobby and we'll talk about God's will for your life. He didn't do that. He said, I was in a meeting, all ministers. We're all sitting there, and I wasn't even a minister. Wasn't ordained, licensed, none of that stuff. I just snuck in. And I was afraid because I thought he was going to spot me. I thought he would know. He snuck in. I thought he was going to go, you, get up and get out of here. I really thought that was going to happen. But we had a panel of all these people, and they were like the who's who in charismatic circles. I mean, everybody was there, and everybody was asking questions, and I had questions, but I was afraid to ask because when they said, all right, yeah, raise your hand. Okay, you, who are you? Where are you from? I'm Reverend so-and-so, Pastor so-and-so from such and such. And I'm like, if I stand out, I just have to say, I'm Curry from Texas. Because I wasn't licensed, ordained, or anything. I wasn't pastoring a church, wasn't doing anything like that, just seeking some truth. So I was afraid to stand up because I was afraid they'd figure it out and kick me out. And so I waited to the very end. They said, all right, we've got maybe enough time for one more question. I'm like, okay, now's my chance. Because now if they kicked me out, it was at the end, it didn't matter. And so they said, the moderator guy said, yes, sir, you young man back there at the back. And I stood up. I didn't say who I was, didn't say anything, because I, again, didn't want them to know. And so I just stood up and I said, because you could direct the question to who you are. This question is for Dr. Summerall. And I asked the question, and then you sit down, right? And he answered the question, and then he said, how soon can you get to South Bend? I'm like, and he's just looking right at me. And I said, I'll get, as soon as I can, as soon as I get back, I'll get there. When you do, come see me. Yes, sir. That was it. All right, thank you. And everybody got up and left out. And I went back out into the meeting that was going on. And my wife was there, my mother was there, my dad was there. And so I told my wife, I said, because they're worshiping. And well, they had some worship, but there was a guy there that was, he was a missionary. And he was basically prophesying. And I mean, he was calling people out and doing some things. And it's funny because I told my wife, I said, I'm going to South Bend. And she said, why? I said, I know Dr. Summerall asked how soon I could get there. She said, okay. And so that's pretty much it. I said, okay, it was done. And then my mother was standing in front of me a little ways up there. There wasn't anybody between us. And this guy walked up. My mom has red hair. And this guy also had red hair that was on the platform. And he was moving through and he was calling people out. And he looked at her, he looked at my mom and said, you, ma'am, right there. And my mom looked and said, yes, ma'am, you with the red hair. He said, God called you to be a missionary when you were a child. And you were never able to do it because you got married very young and never were able to fulfill that call. So you prayed and you passed that call on to your son. And said, God heard that. And he said, is your son here? And my mom said, well, he's in that meeting, and turned around and almost hit me in the face. And said, this is my son. And then, so he prayed. All that happened just within minutes. And then that night we went up, we were all staying in the same hotel where all the speakers were staying. And we went down for supper in the restaurant, and there was Dr. Summerall and the guy that was with him, and then some other people around, and all these people. And that was the first time I ever met Kenneth Copeland was there too. He was there. Kenneth Hagin was there. Norval Hayes was there. T.L. Osborne was there. I mean, they were all sitting behind a table. It looked like the picture of the Last Supper. You know? It's just, And so we walked down, we walked through the lobby, and we went into the restaurant. Walked in, and I saw Dr. Summerall, and we were going to go to a table. And as I walked past Dr. Summerall, I said, "Good evening, Dr. Summerall." And he looked up at me and goes, "Good evening." And I started to walk, and then he looked around, and he said, "Come here." And I told him to hang on, because the hostess was trying to get us to our table. And I walked back over there, and he said, looks at me, and he goes, "Kneel down right here." I'm like, I knelt down. And he leans over and puts his hands on me and begins praying. And he's loud, and I mean, he's going, God, I mean, he just begins praying. Blessing, life, blessing, anointing, let it flow, let it flow. And he said it like several different times. And he gets done, and he said, and giftings. I say giftings. And so he takes his hands off. And he goes, all right, that's it. And I'm like, okay. And literally, when I walked away, it was different because I'd had people lay hands on me before. This was different. He laid his hand here, something happened here. And it was different. And I went over, I didn't even eat. I just sit there, I kept looking over at him, just staring at him. I'm like, that old man is scary. He's a scary man. But all of that happened so quickly. And then I went back, and literally within 3 days, okay, I had no car, I had no money. I quit a job to go there, to that meeting. I had nothing. We wouldn't be able to pay our rent. My wife and my children moved in with her sister. My mom sent me a bus ticket and said, I want to help you get started. Gave me a bus ticket, and I got on a Greyhound bus, rode 3 days on a Greyhound bus to South Bend, Indiana. Got off the bus, got on a city bus, went over to 530 Ireland Road, got off right at Dr. Summerall's church, and then walked inside. We had nothing. I had no place to stay, had no job, had no money, no cash, nothing. And didn't tell anybody anything. And that was Wednesday night, and that night I went to church. Somebody come up, introduced himself to me. Hi, how you doing? What are you doing here? Dr. Summerall said, come. Okay. So, where are you staying? Not sure yet. We got a place in our basement. It's an apartment. You can stay there. So I went and stayed there. What are you going to do for a job? Don't know yet. We know some people that's got a job. They'll hire you tomorrow. You can start tomorrow at 5 o'clock in the morning. Detasseling corn. I'd never done that. God willing, never will again. So anyway, I got to stop. Come on up, man.